Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about a very important topic: 7 signs of a foolish person. Now before we begin, this video is not about judging others. It is not about calling people foolish. It is about understanding certain habits and behaviors that can quietly destroy success, relationships, happiness, and personal growth. The truth is that every person has acted foolishly at some point in life. Every person has made mistakes. Every person has ignored good advice. Every person has allowed emotions to control their decisions. The difference is that wise people learn from these mistakes. Foolish people repeat them. That is why this topic is so important. If you can recognize these signs, you can avoid them. If you can avoid them, you can make better decisions. If you can make better decisions, you can build a better life. Sometimes a single bad habit can keep a person stuck for years. Sometimes a small change in thinking can completely transform a person's future. So, I encourage you to watch until the end. Each sign contains an important life lesson, and you may discover something that changes the way you think about yourself, your goals, and your future. At the same time, this video will help improve your English. As you listen, pay attention to the vocabulary, sentence patterns, and expressions. Try to think in English while listening. The more you listen, the stronger your English becomes. And if you enjoy learning English through powerful life lessons and motivational topics like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and continue learning with us. Sign 1. They never listen to others. One of the biggest signs of a foolish person is the inability to listen. Many people think communication is about speaking, but wise people understand that listening is often more important than talking. A foolish person usually believes they already know enough. Because of this belief, they stop listening. When someone gives advice, they ignore it. When someone shares experience, they ignore it. When someone tries to help them, they ignore it. As a result, they miss valuable lessons. Think about it. Every person you meet knows something that you do not know. Every person has different experiences, different knowledge, different perspectives. When you listen carefully, you gain access to those experiences. You can learn from other people's successes. You can learn from other people's mistakes. You can gain wisdom without having to experience every problem yourself. But a foolish person closes that door. They assume they already have all the answers. This mindset is dangerous, because the moment you stop listening, you stop learning. Imagine a young employee starting a new job. An experienced worker offers advice. The experienced worker has spent years learning valuable lessons, but the young employee refuses to listen. They think, "I already know what I'm doing." Months later, they make mistakes that could have been avoided. Why? Because they ignored wisdom that was freely available. This happens in many areas of life. People ignore financial advice. People ignore health advice. People ignore relationship advice. People ignore educational advice. Then they suffer the consequences. Not because help was unavailable, but because they refuse to listen. Another reason listening is important is that it helps you understand people. Many conflicts happen because people listen only to reply. They do not listen to understand. They interrupt. They assume. They judge too quickly. As a result, misunderstandings grow. Relationships suffer. Opportunities disappear. Wise people listen with curiosity. They ask questions. They seek understanding. They remain open-minded. This does not mean they agree with everything. It simply means they are willing to learn. One of the most powerful qualities you can develop is humility. Humility means understanding that you do not know everything. And that is okay. In fact, admitting that you do not know everything is a sign of wisdom. The smartest people in the world continue learning. They continue asking questions. They continue listening, because they understand that knowledge has no finish line. Think about successful leaders. Think about successful entrepreneurs. Think about successful teachers. Many of them are excellent listeners. They listen to customers. They listen to employees. They listen to mentors. They listen to feedback. This ability helps them grow. A foolish person often does the opposite. They reject feedback. They reject advice. They reject different opinions. Over time, this creates blind spots, and blind spots create mistakes. The truth is simple. Listening does not make you weak. Listening makes you stronger. Listening does not make you less intelligent. Listening helps you become more intelligent. Listening does not reduce your value. Listening increases your understanding. The person who listens learns. The person who learns grows. And the person who grows creates a better future. Tip to avoid this habit. Make it a goal to listen more than you speak. When someone is talking, do not immediately think about your response. Focus on understanding. Ask questions. Be curious. Be open-minded. And remind yourself that every person has something valuable to teach, even if the lesson is what not to do. A foolish person believes they already know everything. A wise person knows there is always more to learn. And the first step to learning is listening. Sign 2. They think they know everything. One of the clearest signs of a foolish person is believing that they already know everything. This habit may not seem dangerous at first, but it can quietly stop a person from growing, learning, and improving. Think about it. If you believe you already know everything, why would you learn? Why would you ask questions? Why would you listen to advice? Why would you improve yourself? The moment a person believes they have nothing left to learn, their growth begins to slow down. And in many cases, it stops completely. Wise people understand something important. No matter how much knowledge they have, there's always more to learn. There is always another lesson, another skill, another perspective, another experience. This is why truly intelligent people are often humble. They know how much they still do not know. A foolish person often behaves differently. They constantly try to prove they are right. They refuse to admit mistakes. They reject feedback. They become defensive whenever someone disagrees with them. Instead of learning, they spend their energy protecting their ego. And that ego becomes a prison. Imagine a glass full of water. If the glass is already full, you cannot pour anything new into it. Knowledge works the same way. If your mind is completely closed, new ideas cannot enter. Growth cannot happen. Learning cannot happen. Success becomes much harder. Think about a person learning English. One learner says, "I already know enough English." As a result, they stop studying. They stop practicing. They stop improving. Another learner says, "There is still more to learn." So they keep reading. They keep listening. They keep speaking. They keep growing. After a few years, the difference becomes enormous. Not because one person was smarter, but because one person remained teachable. This lesson applies to every area of life: business, health, relationships, money, communication, personal development. The people who continue improving are usually the people who continue learning. And the people who continue learning are usually the people who admit they do not know everything. Another danger of thinking you know everything is that it creates arrogance. Arrogance makes people ignore valuable opportunities. Imagine someone receiving advice from a successful mentor. Instead of listening, they think, I already know that. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. But because of their attitude, they never truly listen. And because they never truly listen, they miss valuable insights. This happens more often than people realize. Many opportunities are lost not because knowledge is unavailable, but because people are unwilling to learn. One of the greatest strengths a person can develop is intellectual humility. This means being confident enough to admit when you are wrong. Being confident enough to say, I don't know. Can you teach me? Can you explain that? What can I learn from this? These simple questions open doors. Doors to knowledge, doors to growth, doors to wisdom. The truth is that nobody knows everything. Not teachers, not business leaders, not scientists, not billionaires, not anyone. Every person is still learning. Every person still makes mistakes. Every person still has room to grow. That is what makes life interesting. There is always another lesson waiting to be discovered. Wise people understand this. That is why they remain curious. They remain open-minded. They remain eager to learn. Another powerful reason to stay teachable is that the world keeps changing. Technology changes. Industries change. Skills change. Knowledge changes. The person who stops learning eventually falls behind. The person who continues learning continues growing. Think about successful people. Many of them read books regularly, attend seminars, listen to podcasts, ask questions, seek mentors, study new ideas. Why? Because they understand that learning is a lifelong process. They do not assume they have arrived. They continue growing, and that growth creates opportunities. Remember this powerful truth. The more you learn, the more you realize how much there is still to learn. That realization is not weakness. It is wisdom. Tip to avoid this habit. Develop the habit of curiosity. Ask questions regularly. Be willing to admit when you do not know something. Listen to people with different experiences. Read books, learn new skills, seek feedback. And most importantly, never let your ego become more important than your growth. Because the moment you stop learning, you stop improving. A foolish person thinks they know everything. A wise person knows that learning never ends. And that mindset can completely change the direction of your life. Sign 3. They repeat the same mistakes. A foolish person does not simply make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes are part of life. Mistakes are part of learning. Mistakes are part of growth. But a foolish person keeps repeating the same mistakes again and again without learning from them. That is the real problem. Making a mistake once can be a lesson. Making the same mistake again and again becomes a habit. And when mistakes become habits, they can quietly destroy a person's future. Think about a student who fails an exam. Failing once does not mean the student is foolish. Maybe they did not understand the topic. Maybe they did not prepare well. Maybe they felt nervous. But if the student fails, learns nothing, changes nothing, and studies the same way again, the same result will probably happen. The mistake was not only failing. The bigger mistake was refusing to learn from failure. This happens in many areas of life. Some people keep wasting money and then wonder why they are always broke. Some people keep trusting the wrong people and then wonder why they always feel hurt. Some people keep wasting time and then wonder why they never reach their goals. Some people keep speaking without thinking and then wonder why their relationships suffer. Some people keep avoiding practice and then wonder why their English does not improve. The pattern is the same. They want a new result, but they keep repeating old behavior. That is not wisdom. That is self-destruction. A wise person thinks differently. When they make a mistake, they stop, they reflect. They ask themselves, what went wrong? What can I learn from this? What should I do differently next time? How can I prevent this mistake from happening again? These questions are powerful because they turn mistakes into teachers. A mistake becomes dangerous only when you ignore it. But when you learn from it, it becomes experience. Experience creates wisdom, and wisdom creates better decisions. Imagine touching something hot. The first time, you get hurt. But after that, you learn. You become careful. You do not touch it again. That is how learning should work. But some people keep touching the same fire and then complain that life is burning them. The problem is not only the fire. The problem is the refusal to change. Many people say they want success, but they do not want to change their habits. They want better health, but they keep eating badly and avoiding exercise. They want better English, but they keep avoiding speaking practice. They want better finances, but they keep spending without discipline. They want peace, but they keep choosing drama. They want respect, but they keep making choices that damage their self-respect. The truth is simple. If you want a different life, you must make different choices. You cannot keep repeating the same actions and expect a completely different future. This is one of the most important lessons in personal growth. Your life changes when your patterns change. Not when you complain. Not when you wish. Not when you blame others. Your life changes when you notice your mistakes and choose a better response. Tip to avoid this habit. Start keeping a mistake journal. This does not mean you should hate yourself for mistakes. It means you should study your mistakes like a wise person. When something goes wrong, write 3 simple things. What happened? What did I learn? What will I do differently next time? This small habit can save you years of pain. It helps you stop repeating the same patterns. It helps you become more aware. It helps you grow faster. Also, before making a decision, pause and ask, have I made this mistake before? What happened last time? What should I change now? That pause can protect you from repeating old problems. A mistake is not the end. A mistake is feedback. But if you ignore feedback, life will keep giving you the same lesson again and again. A foolish person repeats mistakes and blames life. A wise person learns from mistakes and changes direction. So do not fear mistakes. Fear repeating them without learning. Because the moment you learn from a mistake, you become wiser than you were before. Sign 4. They blame others for everything. One of the most dangerous signs of a foolish person is constantly blaming others for their problems. Whenever something goes wrong, they immediately look for someone else to blame. They blame their parents. They blame their friends. They blame their boss. They blame society. They blame the economy. They blame bad luck. They blame everyone except themselves. Now, this does not mean that life is always fair. Sometimes people do face difficult circumstances. Sometimes people are treated unfairly. Sometimes bad things happen that are completely outside their control. But foolish people make a habit of blaming others for everything. And that habit keeps them trapped. Why? Because blame removes responsibility. And when responsibility disappears, growth disappears too. Think about it. If every problem is someone else's fault, then why should you improve? Why should you change? Why should you learn? Why should you take action? The moment a person believes they are never responsible for anything, they stop growing. A wise person thinks differently. When something goes wrong, they ask, "What can I learn from this? What could I have done better? What can I improve next time?" Notice the difference. The foolish person looks outward. The wise person looks inward. The foolish person looks for excuses. The wise person looks for solutions. Imagine two employees who lose an important client. The first employee immediately says, "It was my coworker's fault. It was the company's fault. It was bad luck." The second employee says, "Maybe there are things I can improve. Maybe I need better communication skills. Maybe I should prepare more carefully next time." Which person is more likely to improve? The second person. Not because they are perfect, but because they take responsibility. Responsibility is powerful. Many people think responsibility is a burden, but responsibility is actually freedom. Because when you take responsibility, you gain the power to change things. When you blame others, you give away that power. Imagine someone learning English. They say, "My English is bad because I don't have a teacher. My English is bad because I started late. My English is bad because nobody speaks English around me." These excuses may sound reasonable, but do they improve English? No. The learner remains stuck. Now imagine another learner. They say, "I may not have perfect conditions, but I can still practice. I can listen every day. I can read every day. I can improve little by little." That person takes responsibility. And because they take responsibility, they continue growing. This is one of the biggest differences between successful people and unsuccessful people. Successful people focus on what they can do. Unsuccessful people often focus on who they can blame. Another problem with blame is that it creates a victim mindset. A victim mindset says, "My life will improve only when other people change. My life will improve only when circumstances change. My life will improve only when luck changes." This mindset is dangerous because it places your future in someone else's hands. A wise mindset says, "I may not control everything, but I control my actions. I control my attitude. I control my effort." That mindset creates strength. That mindset creates progress. That mindset creates success. Think about some of the most successful people in the world. Many of them faced enormous challenges. Some grew up poor. Some faced rejection. Some experienced failure. Some faced criticism. Yet they refused to spend their lives blaming others. Instead, they focused on what they could do. They focused on improving themselves. And that focus changed their future. There is another important lesson here. Blaming others may protect your ego temporarily. It may help you avoid feeling uncomfortable. But it also prevents growth. Growth begins when you honestly examine yourself. Growth begins when you stop making excuses. Growth begins when you ask, "What is my role in this situation?" That question can transform your life because it shifts your attention from blame to improvement. And improvement is where real change happens. Tip to avoid this habit. The next time something goes wrong, resist the urge to blame immediately. Instead, Pause and ask yourself 3 questions. What happened? What can I learn from this? What can I do differently next time? Focus on your response rather than someone else's mistake. Even when circumstances are unfair, there is usually something you can improve. Focus on that, because your growth matters more than your excuses. Blame makes you feel better for a moment. Responsibility makes your life better for years. A foolish person looks for someone to blame. A wise person looks for a lesson to learn. And that single difference can completely change the direction of a person's life. Sign 5. They act without thinking. One strong sign of a foolish person is that they act without thinking. They speak before they understand. They decide before they check the facts. They react before they control their emotions. They jump into things without asking, "Is this the right choice?" This habit can create many problems in life. A person may lose good relationships because they speak in anger. They may lose money because they make quick decisions. They may lose opportunities because they do not prepare. They may damage their future because they choose temporary feelings over long-term wisdom. Acting quickly is not always bad. Sometimes life needs fast action. But acting without thinking is dangerous. There is a big difference between confidence and carelessness. A confident person can act quickly because they understand the situation. A careless person acts quickly because they do not want to think. Imagine someone receives an angry message. Without thinking, they reply immediately with harsh words. A few minutes later, they regret it. The relationship becomes damaged. Trust becomes weaker. All because of one emotional reaction. Now imagine a wise person in the same situation. They read the message. They feel angry. But they pause. They breathe. They wait. They think, "What result do I want from my reply?" Then they answer calmly. The situation becomes easier to handle. This is the power of thinking before acting. A foolish person is controlled by the moment. A wise person thinks about the result. This also happens with money. Some people buy things because they feel excited. They do not ask, "Do I need this?" They do not ask, "Can I afford this?" They do not ask, "Will this help my future?" They just buy. Later they feel stressed. The problem was not only money. The problem was acting without thinking. This also happens with goals. Some people start something because they feel motivated for one day. Then they quit after a few days because they never made a real plan. They acted from excitement, not wisdom. A wise person does not depend only on emotion. They think. They plan. They prepare. They ask better questions. Before speaking, they ask, "Is this helpful?" Before deciding, they ask, "What could happen next?" Before reacting, they ask, "Will I regret this later?" Before starting, they ask, "What is my plan?" These questions protect your future. Thinking before acting does not make you slow. It makes you smart. A short pause can save you from a long regret. Tip to avoid this habit: use the pause rule. Before you speak, decide, reply, spend money, or react emotionally. Pause for a few seconds. Take a breath. Ask yourself, "What am I doing? Why am I doing this? What will happen after this? Will this help me or hurt me?" This small habit can change your life. Because many problems are created in moments of emotion, but the results can last for years. A foolish person reacts first and regrets later. A wise person pauses first and chooses better. Think before you act. Because one calm decision can protect your peace, your relationships, your money, and your future. Sign 6. They refuse to learn and grow. One of the saddest signs of a foolish person is refusing to learn and grow. Life is constantly changing. The world is constantly changing. Technology changes, skills change, opportunities change, knowledge changes. A person who refuses to learn eventually gets left behind. Many people think growth stops after school. They believe that once they become adults, learning is no longer necessary. This is a dangerous belief, because learning is not something you do for a few years. Learning is something you do for life. Think about successful people. Most of them are lifelong learners. They read books. They listen to experts. They learn new skills. They ask questions. They stay curious. Why? Because they understand that growth creates opportunities. The more you learn, the more valuable you become. The more valuable you become, the more opportunities appear. A foolish person often says, "I already know enough. I don't need to learn that. I'm too old to learn. Learning is not important." These thoughts may feel comfortable, but they are extremely dangerous. Comfort often prevents growth. Imagine a person who refuses to learn new technology. At first, nothing seems wrong, but year after year, the world moves forward. Eventually, that person struggles because their skills are outdated. The same thing happens in every area of life. A person who stops learning stops improving. A person who stops improving often becomes stuck. Think about English learning. Some learners practice every day. They read, they listen, they improve. Other learners stop learning because progress feels slow. Years later, the difference becomes enormous. Not because one person was more talented, but because one person continued growing. Growth is powerful. Even small improvements can create huge changes over time. Learning one new idea every day may seem insignificant, but after 1 year, those small lessons become valuable knowledge. After 5 years, they can completely transform your life. Another reason growth matters is confidence. When you learn new things, you prove to yourself that you are capable. You become more adaptable. You become more prepared for life's challenges. You become stronger mentally. The truth is that growth often feels uncomfortable. Learning new skills requires effort. Making mistakes requires humility. Starting as a beginner requires courage. That is why many people avoid growth. But the temporary discomfort of learning is much better than the long-term pain of remaining stuck. Remember this powerful truth. If you're not growing, you are standing still. And while you stand still, the world keeps moving forward. Tip to avoid this habit. Commit to learning something new every day. Read books. Listen to educational content. Learn new skills. Ask questions. Stay curious. You do not need to learn for hours. Even a few minutes of learning every day can create extraordinary results over time. Remember, growth is a choice. And every day you choose growth, you invest in a better future. Sign 7. They ignore good advice. The final sign of a foolish person is ignoring good advice. Life gives us many teachers, parents, mentors, friends, books, experts, experience. These teachers often provide valuable lessons. But a foolish person ignores them. Sometimes the advice is simple. Sometimes it is powerful. Sometimes it could prevent years of struggle. Yet they refuse to listen. Why? Because they think they already know better. Or because they do not want to change. Or because their ego gets in the way. Think about how valuable good advice really is. A person may spend 10 years learning a lesson. Then they share that lesson with you in a few minutes. If you listen, you can benefit from their experience. If you ignore it, you may repeat the same mistakes. This is one reason wise people seek mentors. They understand that learning from others can save time, money, and pain. Imagine someone giving financial advice. They warn you about a common mistake. You ignore them. Years later, you experience exactly the problem they described. The lesson was available, but you refuse to accept it. This happens in many areas of life. People ignore health advice. Then they suffer health problems. People ignore relationship advice. Then they face relationship difficulties. People ignore career advice. Then they struggle professionally. The issue is not always a lack of information. Often the issue is a lack of willingness to listen. Now, this does not mean you should follow every piece of advice. Not all advice is good advice. Wise people think carefully. They evaluate information. They consider the source. They use judgment. But when advice comes from experience, wisdom, and knowledge, they pay attention. A foolish person often dismisses advice immediately. A wise person examines it carefully. Another important lesson is that advice often sounds boring. People prefer exciting shortcuts. They prefer quick success. They prefer easy answers. But good advice is often simple. Work hard, be disciplined, save money, keep learning, take care of your health, control your emotions, stay consistent. These ideas may not sound exciting, but they work, and that is why they have survived for generations. The challenge is not hearing good advice. The challenge is following it. Many people know what they should do. Very few people actually do it. That is the difference. Knowledge is valuable, but applied knowledge is powerful. The person who follows good advice often avoids many unnecessary problems. The person who ignores good advice often learns lessons the hard way. Life will teach everyone eventually. The question is whether you learn through wisdom or through pain. Tip to avoid this habit. Whenever someone experienced gives you advice, do not reject it immediately. Pause and consider it. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Why are they saying this? Could this help me avoid a mistake? Keep an open mind. Stay teachable. And never let your ego become more important than your growth. Remember this powerful truth. A foolish person ignores wisdom and repeats avoidable mistakes. A wise person listens, learns, and grows. The lessons of others can become shortcuts to your success if you are willing to listen.